which we took a break last week, but last time we met, we talked about the Crusades and how they actually set up Crusader states. These were kingdoms that existed for over 100 years in the Holy Land, okay? It would come to be called Outremer or the Levant, okay? So, anyways, we talked about the First Crusade was the most successful. It hit the Muslims at a time which they were disorganized, they were not ready, and they also did not know how to fight the heavily armored knights of the Europeans. They were not used to that. The Muslims were used to riding around in the desert, in which case you don't want to be wearing heavy armor, right? You want to be wearing cloth or wicker at most. Wicker? Yeah, literally the wicker chairs and stuff, they used to make shields like that. You know what I'm talking about? Like where you sit in? Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah. So they did not like the heavy stuff there. Give me just a second here. They had some mess, yeah. It's a real thing. Okay, and so with these kingdoms being established, they ran into a very big problem, and that was that the armies that came and conquered those kingdoms, a bunch of the men that came, guess what they wanted to do? They wanted to go back home, right? And so this led to the rise of the establishment of the military orders. There were many of them. The top three that we have talked about and are going to continue to talk about today are the Templars, the Hospitallers, and then also the Teutonic Knights is another big one, okay? So those are the three military orders. Those three military orders answer directly to the Pope and only to the Pope, okay? So now the Pope has his own army that answers directly to him. And at the height of their power, the Templars actually were able to field the most advanced, the deadliest force on earth at the time, okay? Pound for pound, they weren't matched by anyone. Of course, your Battle of Warriors, whatever show that comes on TV, always likes to match up the Templars with the samurais and see who would win. Of course, they never met. So, but anyway, long story short, during their time period, the Templars were the most deadly soldiers on the planet. They took the idea of monasticism, which is this secluded lifestyle of the monks that we're used to kind of seeing in TV shows and stuff. They paired that with the lifestyle of a warrior, and so they would dedicate themselves to devotion among the brothers, and then also to warfare and training, right? And at the time, there weren't very many professional standing armies that did that. Most of your armies at the time were made up of kind of like hodgepodge militias, like, hey guys, there's an army coming, we all need to go grab your clubs, your pitchforks, anything that might be sharp, anything you can kill someone with, and let's go fight them. And so when they started running into professional troops that did nothing but dedicate their lives to combat, you can imagine how that went, right? So, okay, so we got those three big military orders. They answer directly to the Pope and only to the Pope. We talked 2 weeks ago about how the Templars met their end, right? Y'all remember that? They ticked off the King of France when he was a kid. They killed his mom. He became the King of France, and he held a grudge. And he ordered, on a Friday the 13th, he ordered all of the Templars be arrested all across Europe and be burned at the stake, okay? And so, again, the English were not so big on that because they didn't particularly care for the French. So, you know, we got them all, guys, type deal, you know? They didn't really wipe them out in England as much, okay? So what we did not talk much about was the Teutonic Order or the Hospitallers, okay? So Acre, which is right here, we looked it up last time. You'll see it right there, Acre, whatever you want to call it. A-C-R-E, how do you pronounce that? Acre? Okay, I like acres. Acres are good, okay. So Acre would be the last city to fall of the Crusader kingdom. So when all of this would come collapsing down, the last city to fall would be Acre, okay? And when Acre falls, that would mark the end of the Christian presence in the Holy Land, all the way up until present day, okay? There would no longer be any sort of Christian nation in the area. I guess you could argue Lebanon. But, all right, so we talked a lot about the end of that First Crusade, the Battle of Hattin, and what took place at the Horns of Hattin. The king of the Crusaders was an idiot, marched his army out to go chase them, ran out of water, and the Muslims positioned themselves in between the water and and the Christian army. And the Christians literally went crazy that night because they were dying of thirst. And so the battle wasn't much of a battle, it was more of a massacre. And that's what happened there. Jerusalem would fall, and that would mark the end of the First Crusade, right? The Crusader kingdom would last for the 100 years before Hatton would take place. These kingdoms were there. And then we talked about the Second Crusade. Didn't go very well. They were defeated without ever achieving anything really. The Third Crusade is the King's Crusade. We talked about that one, where you had the King of France, King of England, and Barbarossa, who was the king of what would be Germany, I guess, at the time, Holy Roman Empire. And long story short, the king of Germany, Barbarossa, he would drown crossing a river. He fell off his horse, wearing full armor. Can't swim when you're wearing full plate. And so he drowned. All of his troops went home. They said, forget this. And then the French king, he would get there and then said, no, I'm not about this life. Turn around. He went home. And that just left the king of England, who was Richard the Lionheart, who would go on to fight Salahuddin, who was the leader, the Muslim general who defeated the Christians at Hattin. He would go on. They would fight back and forth without any clear victory. Like there was no decisive victory between those two armies as they would fight. At the end of the day, Richard got word that his kingdom was falling apart back home and someone was trying to take his throne. And so he made a peace treaty with Salahuddin that guaranteed protection of Christians in Jerusalem, that pilgrims could come. And then he packed up his stuff and his army and he went back home, right? That's where all your Robin Hood movies and all that stuff are set during that time period, right? Sheriff of Nottingham and all that stuff. Richard, I don't think he actually made it home. I think he died in France before he got home. Isn't that right? I think he died at one of the sieges there before he made it back. But he was kind of crazy. So turns out that cousin marrying is a bad idea. So, okay. So that kind of recaps most of the Crusades. Acre would fall, I got the date, in 1291, the fall of Acre would happen, and that would mark the end of all these kingdoms, okay? That's in 1291. The date for the First Crusade, I believe, is 1054, right? So for over 200 years, right, 1054 to 1291, that's 240 years, roughly, right? 230-something years. These Crusader states stayed there. And if nothing else, regardless of whatever else happens, looking at it from this side of history, over 1,000 years, or roughly 1,000 years later, 800 years later, what it did was it kept the Muslim attention in this area. Islam was focused on getting rid of these Crusader states. They weren't so concerned about pushing up to Constantinople. They weren't so concerned about trying to push out of Spain and into France. They were calling up jihads and armies to go kill these Christians that have taken this land, right? Particularly in Jerusalem, they had one of their most holy sites, which is the Dome of the Rock, right? It had already shown up by then, okay? So how dare these Christians hold a Muslim holy site? This is unacceptable. Go get them. So, however you feel about the Crusades, were there atrocities? Yes, on all sides. It was a common thing at the time. Were they theologically approved? Was it something that Jesus called these men to go do? No, probably not. Geopolitically, did it save Europe from becoming Muslim? Possibly, because it bought Europe 200 years before those Muslim armies start moving into Europe, okay? All right, and then of course the crusade, I believe it's the Fourth Crusade, is the one that sacks Constantinople. Can you pull up our map of Constantinople? And what you'll hear, yeah, there's the city. We'll talk about that here in a minute. What you'll hear about Constantinople is that, well, the Fourth Crusade that sacked the city, they're the reason why Constantinople fell. That's not true. Okay, we looked up the dates for that last time we were here. Constantinople wouldn't fall until 200 years after the Fourth Crusade, right? So, not the case, right? And by the way, it would also fend off many more Muslim attacks in those 200 years, right? So, you'll hear that all the time, whatever. You'll also hear that Salahuddin was a much more merciful person than any of the Christians and all this other stuff. Hogwash, right? It is true that he did spare Jerusalem. He did not put Jerusalem to the sword when he conquered it. When the first crusade got there, they did put the city to the sword when they got there. That did happen. So shame on them. Bad for them. But as we're going to talk about today, very common thing to do at the time, right? Very common thing to do at the time. Doesn't mean that it's all right. Doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do, but it wasn't out of place for the age, okay? Okay, we'll talk about Constantinople here in a minute. First, I'll pull up a picture of a Templar. And of course, these have been kind of romanticized quite a bit. Oh, you got all three of them next to each other. That's cool. The one, I guess, that one's a Templar. That's a Hospitaller, and the other one's supposed to be a Teutonic Knight? Okay. All right. So obviously these have been super romanticized and all the lore and all this stuff going around with the Crusaders. It's funny, there actually used to be a couple mascots that had Templars as their mascots. They've kind of gotten rid of those in the last 20 or 30 years. There's no high schools or football teams or anything like that as the Templars. The Muslims still view them as a very large threat and a symbol of genocide, right? They kind of view the Templar sign as a sign of, like we would view the swastika, for example, right? So our super sensitive culture decided to get rid of that. Okay, so the Templars, of course, were white with a red cross, right? The Hospitallers, we're actually going to talk about them quite a bit today. Knights of St. John. Remember, the Templars, their job was the temple, maintaining the Temple Mount and all the things there with the Holy Sepulchre, and also protecting pilgrims. The Hospitallers, their job was to manage the hospitals at Jerusalem and in the Crusader states. They were, in many ways, yes, they were warriors, but they were also nurses, okay? They took care of sick people. And then the Teutonic Knights, find me a winged helmet with the Teutonic Knight, because that really makes them stand out there, Dakota. You found me one with a kettle helm on, or just a regular helmet. The Teutonic Knights, we don't hear a lot about them, mainly because we don't know anything at all about Eastern Europe as Americans. We really just kind of blot that whole part out. But the Teutonic Knights fought. Yes, they fought in the Holy Land. Yes, they fought at Jerusalem. Yes, they were there at the fall of Acre. They were there for all those battles. But their main theater of war was actually in the northeast. And yeah, there you go. That's what I'm trying to get him to find for me. Yeah, showing that. It looks really cool, doesn't it? There you go. There's the winged helmet for a Teutonic Knight. They actually wore those. They look pretty cool, I thought. So I figured I'd show you all those. There is some debate as to whether or not they actually used those in combat, if they were just used for the jousting tournaments. They said it would be very impractical to have all that metal on your head, but these guys were a lot tougher than we are anyway. So anyway, what was I talking about before that? Oh, we were talking about their theater of war. Can you pull up your Google Maps real quick? See if I can get you to, all right. Zoom down on the bottom of Norway. Actually, that's Finland, I think. Here, nope, over here. Come over here to Riga. This way. Here. That was Sweden you were in, by the way. Yeah, see, there's Finland. Okay, so the Teutonic Knights would actually establish a kingdom that would be in this area right here. They would own this part, okay? And during Napoleon's era, it would come to be called Prussia, right? Which was a very big deal when we get to that part of history. Anyways, they were here. This Livonia over here, it's called Livonia. The Livonians, which occupied much of this area across their borders, were still pagans, okay? They were not Christianized at all, wanted nothing to do with Christians. And so the Teutonic Knights kind of held the line up here in this part. And ironically enough, the Kingdom of Poland, which is a Catholic kingdom, would eventually ally with the pagans of Lithuania and wipe out the Teutonic Knights. Okay, so that would take place. That would be how they met their end. Okay, that battle in which they would lose would be called the Battle of Grunwald. They were outnumbered 2-1 when they fought that battle. There's a castle that still exists today. Google this, see if you can pull it up, Dakota. It's the Castle of Marienburg. Really shows their architecture style and things like that. It's quite amazing. Pull it up on images, I think you can see it. This castle was their headquarters. That's not it. Pull up images. not looking like the one that I found. But whatever, click on this one. Yeah, there you go. It was, I don't know if that's a modern day depiction of it or what it looked like then. But anyways, they had really cool architecture and things like that. Okay, at the Battle of Grunwald, the Teutonic Knights, by the way, they lost 211 out of 270 leadership positions in their order. So they all died on the battlefield there. That pretty much sums up their end, was they met their end on the battlefield, which, by the way, is a much better end than the Templars met, being burned alive by the Pope, right? So, okay, pull up our map of the Mongols. While the Crusader kingdoms are still there and holding off, this happens, okay? The Mongol Empire, which is the largest land-based empire to date, nothing else comes close, okay? The Mongols were arguably the deadliest force to ever see the face of the planet. It's debated that up to 1/3 of Europe's population would die under Mongol invasions, right? A ton of people. Can you zoom down on that, or is that just a static map? Static? Okay. As you can see, they go from the Pacific to the Mediterranean, okay? Massive, massive empire, right? Of course, who's their big leader that got them all famous? You always post a joke, huh? Which one? Khan is the title, huh? Genghis, yeah. Genghis Khan he will go down in history. He has gone down in history as one of the most ruthless people to ever walk on the face of the planet, okay? Terrible, absolutely terrible, okay? One thing we need to talk about is the fall of Babylon, which is going to take place not under Genghis Khan. It's Baghdad at the time. Can you pull up your Google Maps? Let's kind of zoom down on Baghdad. Let's test your geography here, Dakota. All right, it's not up there, so come down, way down here, over here. Right in here. Zoom down right here. There it is. Stop right there. That's good enough. Okay, so Baghdad has been under Muslim control at this point for over 500 years, right? I believe it's the Sunni Muslims that are there that's taken place. And Abbasids is their caliphate. That's their, as we would say, dynasties or whatever. The Abbasid Caliphate is there, and they're capitaled in Baghdad. That's kind of their place to go. The Mongols had a neat little tradition where they would send you the heads of the most recently conquered kings and tell you to surrender. And if you said no, then your head was going next, right? That's how this worked. Their mode of operation was that they would offer you a chance to surrender. If you did not surrender and completely submit to them and pay them huge amounts of money and also send troops to their campaigns, if you did not do that, then they were coming for you, okay? And also, the more you resisted, the less of your civilization would be left, okay? And so, word comes to the leader of the Abbasid Caliphate here in Baghdad that, hey, there's some Mongols coming, and they've asked you to destroy your walls, fill in your moat, and send out your troops and be on your knees waiting, be on their knees waiting when our army gets there. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. And then they said, okay, we want you, the leader of this 500-year-old kingdom at this point, you're going to go bend the knee to the great Khan. It wasn't Genghis, it was one of his sons at the time, in person, all the way halfway across the world. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that either, okay? So the Mongols do what the Mongols do, and they assemble an army to go deal with them. The Mongol army that is going to approach Baghdad is over 100,000 strong. Yeah, serious stuff. So the Abbasid Caliphate decides that they're going to send a large cavalry contingent out to go deal with them. They send, let's see, if there's 12,000, that means there's 6,000. So they send out a cavalry scout force to delay the siege of Baghdad of 6,000 horsemen. Those horsemen ride out, they clash with the Mongols. Initially hey, we're victorious, they're running back. They chase after them. The Mongols break levees behind them and then turn on them. kill every single one of them. All 6,000 of them are dead. So the Mongols send a gift to the great Khan of 12,000 ears in boxes and say, here you go, we were victorious. And then they go to Baghdad. At this point, the leader of the Abbasid Caliphate's like, hey, you know, we've thought about that whole vassalization thing, paying you guys some money. We really want to do that. He killed the messengers. Would not be heard. So, in 1257, Baghdad is completely besieged by the Mongols, and what would follow from that is one of the worst atrocities in human history. You can even forget about World War II atrocities. The Mongols would take Baghdad, destroy the whole dynasty. None would live. So they believed, the Mongols, they were neat about finding little tricks. So they believed that you would be cursed if you spilled the blood of a leader, right? So you couldn't shoot them with an arrow or stab them with a sword. So when they finally did capture this Muslim leader here at Baghdad, they wrapped him up in a rug and then trampled him over with horses. And that was how they got away with that, right? So they avoided their curse. But they killed him, his family, completely wiped them out, never to exist again. And then in the city of Baghdad itself, they would then spend a week destroying every single thing in the city, people included. They spent over a week, 100,000 soldiers spent over a week killing everybody and everything and burning everything they could inside the city. During the siege itself, the Mongol leader would offer the troops, he said, hey, look, if y'all come out and surrender, we'll let some of y'all live, right? And so they would come out and surrender, they'd kill them all, right? Every time, did it every time. The only people to survive the siege of Baghdad, and this is why we're talking about this, is actually a small group of Nestorian Christians that were allowed. It turns out that the Mongol leader, I would try to pronounce his name, but it wouldn't do any good. So the Mongol leader's wife was a Christian. We see this again, right? How many times has this been brought up now, right? It keeps coming up. And so she asked that the Christians be preserved at Baghdad. And so the only place that wasn't put totally to the sword and destroyed was apparently they had a Nestorian Christian church that was there. So as far as casualties in Baghdad, what did that look like? They talk about, historical records talk about the mountain of heads and bodies and stuff like that. It's literally like the stuff of nightmares. But the low figure is 800,000. The high figure is 2 million. Okay? That's a lot of dead people. Historians record, the people record that the blood was, the walls wind up serving as the liner, like a pool for the blood, that it was, you were wading in blood up to ankle and knee deep in places, right? The Mongols' reputation is well deserved, right? They would, of course, destroy this whole city, and guess what? They sent heads to the next kingdom and said, surrender. Right? That's what they did. You can zoom up real quick, and I'll show just kind of what zoom out. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Whoop. Go to Egypt, over here. So it would actually be over here that the Mongols would finally, that Mongol army would finally be defeated by the Muslims. It would be defeated by what at the time was called the Mamluk Empire. Okay. Sound familiar? I think it's because the Marines carry Mamluk sword, right, for Tripoli. Isn't that a thing? I need Jim here. I think the Marines still have, U.S. Marines today, that's one of their awards or something like that, is a Mamluk sword. Ask Jim Parsons about it, he'll tell you. Anyways, the Mongols would be stopped here. Now you said, Matt, why are we talking about the Mongols? Why are we talking about Baghdad? The fall of Baghdad, it's like the burning of the library in Alexandria, right? They had something there called the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. That of course the Mongols burned every single book in there, and we don't know what was lost. It's just like the Library of Alexandria. It's gone, right? It's hard to imagine. Just think about that kind of report spreading across the rest of the world, that there have been 800,000 to 2 million people slaughtered inside this city. And you're hearing about these armies that are coming from the east. They're riding on the backs of these horses, and nobody can stop them. Nobody's been able to defeat them, and they're coming for you. The Crusaders would actually fight the Mongols in those Crusader states that we pulled up. They would still be there by the time the Mongols showed up. The Crusaders and the Mongols tried to maintain neutrality for the most part. They're like, hey, leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. The Mongols were okay with that, and the Christians were okay with that, and here's why. Because the Mongols were going after the Mamelukes. They were going after the Muslims. And generally, the Mongols were pretty strategic. They weren't just, foaming at the mouth, rabid people all the time. They were if you were their enemy, but they were pretty good about maintaining, let's fight one at a time, right? And so probably what they were doing while they pretty much tried to avoid the Christians for the most part in the Crusades was they were trying to finish off the Muslims, then go deal with the Christians in Outremer, right, in the Holy Land. So they would not be able to finish them off there. Okay, so the fall of Baghdad would take place in 1257, right? And so 1257 is the fall of Baghdad, 1291 is the fall of Acre, so your Crusader states are gone. The Muslim power in the east is pretty much gone at the time, and the Mongol Empire would have to shrink back down into a pebble of what it was before the Muslims would retake that land, okay? Which brings us to, let's go ahead and talk about Constantinople in 1453. So pull up our map of Constantinople again. Okay, so in the same thing as Acre, we'll call it Acre, I'll stop calling it Acre. All right, so notice that this is a peninsula, right? When we pulled up a map of Acre 2 weeks ago, it looked the same way. The Muslims did not control the sea, right? They controlled the land. And this was true of Acre as well. So it's very hard to siege out a city that has water on three sides if you don't control the ocean, okay? But by this time, by the time we get to 1453, the Ottoman Empire, pull up our map of the Ottoman Empire, I'll show what's happened by 1453. By 1453, the Crusader states are all gone. The Ottoman Empire has now gone past Constantinople, and they would use this route to go here, and they're now pushing up into Hungary and the Baltics. Okay, I think that's Baltics. That's Baltics? What's right there? Somebody who's good at geography, right here. Kosovo, all that stuff. Is it called the Baltics? Oh, y'all are all worse at geography than I am. It is called the Baltics? We just fought a war there not too long ago, right? Was it Sarajevo? In Sarajevo, right in that area? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. Okay, anyways, the purple, by the way, here and here, this is what's left of the Byzantine Empire by 1450. By 1450, that's what's left of the Eastern Roman Empire, is the purple, okay? The Ottoman Empire is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and it is going to get massive. The Ottoman Empire is still in its infancy, and by the way, the Ottoman Empire wouldn't be fully dealt with until World War I. So, yeah, big issues there. World War I is when they decided to bust them up, and we'll talk about the reasons for that when we get to World War I. Okay, so Constantinople is right here, okay? Go back to our map of Constantinople. All right, so long story short, the numbers for Constantinople, it's kind of like the last bastion, if you will, of any sort of Christian presence in the whole area, right? Islam, again, don't ever let anyone tell you that Islam is a religion of peace. Islam has always been spread by the sword. From the moment it showed up, from Muhammad to today, it is spread by the sword. The problem now is we have better swords, okay? They can't do it. All right. But by 1453, when Constantinople is finally besieged, there's over 100,000 Ottomans that lay siege to the city. They have 69 cannons. Cannons have shown up on the scene by the time 1453 rolls around. These are not the sophisticated cannons you think of when you see World War II. In fact, if you want to pull up a picture of the Orban Bombard, put that in, see what you pull up and see what you get there. They shoot stone, right? He'll work on that for us. Anyways, 100,000 men, 69 cannons, 126 ships. The Byzantines, what's left of them, the Eastern Roman Empire, has 7,000 men, 50 cannons, and 30,000 militia and 26 ships. So it is literally a David and Goliath situation. The Orban Bombard, Orban, it fired, first off, it took 3 hours to reload this gun, and this gun would fire a cannonball, a stone ball that weighed 1,500 pounds. Okay? They call it the Great Bombard. It took hundreds of men and horses to move this thing into position. There you go. It is also 27 foot long. So, a big old gun, right? This is what they used to break the walls at Constantinople, right? Remember the city, those city walls had literally held for 1,000 years, and that big dude finally started bringing them down. Pull up our map of Constantinople. During the siege, this is one of the things the Ottomans would become famous for. The defenders ran a chain right here, right? So that the Navy, the Ottoman Navy, couldn't come up here in the Golden Horn and land troops to attack on multiple fronts, right? This serves as a giant bottleneck, if you will. So they couldn't get past this chain. They tried. They were defeated. By the way, the Emperor of Constantinople is crying out for help to the Pope. No help comes. However, the Venetians do send 700 troops and a couple of ships to come and help them, right? Now, 700 against 100,000, it's a death wish, right? Even, doesn't matter how good your armor is, somebody's going to get through, okay? So a little bit of help would come from the Venetians, but nowhere near enough. Constantine what is he? He's the 14th, I believe. Something like that. 11th? He's the 11th. Constantine the 11th would be asking for help from the Pope, asking him to call up another crusade, and that crusade would never be called. So with this chain right here, the Navy was kind of rendered useless, and they were able to kind of get supplies across through here. So the Ottomans did something quite remarkable. They landed over here with their ships, and then picked up their ships and hauled them over and dropped them over here. So there you go. There's a military feat for you, all right? They hauled their ships. They hauled their navy over land and defeated the defenders' navy, which was out here, which was able to supply the city. Long story short, obviously it was a lost cause. So 1453, Constantinople would fall, and then from there, the Muslim conquest, pull up your Google Maps again. From there, the Muslim conquest would, yeah, you changed it to, oh, there you go, okay. Zoom out. Go up, north, yep, oh, stop, zoom down. Oh, right there, stop. Zoom up some more, or go up north some more. See if I can read this map. Go this way. I don't know why they did it. Zoom out, sorry. Oh, okay. Once this falls, the Muslim conquest would continue to advance, and it would make it all the way to here. Okay? The Hungarians, by the way, in case you ever wonder why Hungarians do not like Muslims today, it's because ever since the fall of Constantinople, and even a little bit before the fall of Constantinople, these guys were the bulwark. Okay? Hungarians have zero tolerance for Muslims. That's why, what's his name? Viktor Orban, I think is his name today. When everybody was taking in all the refugees from Syria years ago, he's like, nope, we don't want them. Don't want them. And all the rest of the Europeans like, how could you? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, let's see, 600 years of massacre and bloodshed in here. How about that? Right? We don't think so. Right? Y'all may have forgotten what these guys have done, but we have not forgotten. And so he has zero tolerance for that. And the Hungarian people as a whole, if you ever meet a Hungarian, ask them how they feel about Islam, and let me know how that goes for you. Be sure you tell them you're a Christian first before you ask them about Islam. They have very, very low tolerance for it. Okay, so Vienna right here, the king, that is the capital of Austria, all right? Vienna would be laid siege to many, many times by Ottoman armies, okay? Like many times. And if you zoom out more, so I want you to think about this for a minute. This is where the Muslim conquest stopped, okay? Here, and then over here. Look at how little tiny bit of Europe is left. From here to here is all gone. Okay? So, um, serious stuff there, right? It would be at the walls of Vienna, of course, that right before the city, there was a time that the city was besieged, and they cried out for help. You'd think that we would learn and deal with this beforehand, but after hundreds of cities falling the same way, they never did learn. But anyways, it would be at the walls of Vienna that the largest cavalry charge in history would ever take place. The Polish would answer the call for help at Vienna, and I have to Google how many horses it was, but it's essentially more than what you see in Lord of the Rings, right? Give me a second. Tens of thousands. Yeah, 18,000 horsemen. So they would show up and charge into an army that was much bigger than them. Okay, I'm sure the Ottoman army that was at Vienna probably close to 100,000 again. Okay, so that's where, in case you're wondering, that's where Tolkien gets his inspiration for Lord of the Rings, the final battle at Minas Tirith when they ride in to relieve the city. That's what he had in mind, was trying to picture that, right? So, okay, and that happened in 1683. It would be after that breaking in 1683 that the Muslims would never advance to Vienna again. Okay, that would be the farthest they got, and that would be 1683. Okay. Okay, so we've covered Constantinople, covered the fall of Baghdad. We've covered the fall of the Teutonic Order, what those guys, how they met their end. One detail I left out. This is another neat little factor here at Baghdad. Zoom back in on, go back down to Baghdad. It's going to be right here. Yeah, right there. Zoom down. So one thing they tried to do when they realized the city was lost, hold on, stop, is they tried to get on the boats to sail down the rivers, only to find out that the Mongols downriver, out of sight of the defenders of the city, had built bridges over the river so that they could shoot them with arrows as they went by. So, zero escape, right? Okay. All right. Okay, so the Templars are gone, the Teutonic Knights are gone. Now let's talk about the Hospitallers, or the Knights of St. John, as they would become called. Zoom back up. Go this way. Zoom way up. Sorry. We don't need to see their interstates. All right. Come all the way over here to Sicily. All right, yep, go down there to a little island called Malta. All right, so this might be pretty cool, actually. So this is where, once all the Crusader kingdoms have fallen, this is where the Hospitallers would retreat to. The Knights of St. John would go, take refuge there. They knew that they were the biggest target for the Muslims, because the Muslims want to kill anything to do with Christian Crusaders. And so they started fortifying this city like crazy. Okay, this island becomes a island fortress. There's actually, I heard a rumor that Mel Gibson may actually be making a movie about the defense of Malta when that comes. So that may be cool. Hopefully it makes it for, he's getting old, don't want him to die on me. Is he? He's doing that? Okay, there you go. That'd be something. All right, let's see. Down a whole lot of notes about Malta. Long story short, the Ottomans, after the fall of Constantinople, one of the things they do is they decide that this island needs to fall. And so another reason why is because one of the things at this point, one of the things that the Hospitallers of the Knights of St. John had started doing is they had decided to dedicate themselves to safe passage of the sea for pilgrims wanting to get to Jerusalem. Zoom back out again. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, stop. Meantime, the Ottoman Empire has now consumed almost, let's see, they go from here to about here, right? So all of this is now the Ottoman Empire, including the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, here's what's happening. The Barbary states have arisen, and they are kind of like vassals of the Ottomans. Long story short, these people here in North Africa, these Muslims, make their living by piracy. Okay, instead of the pirates of the Caribbean, it's the pirates of the Mediterranean, right? That's literally what it was. And instead of the European powers, who had much bigger and better boats dealing with it, they just decide to send them a bunch of money, and then they decide that, well, okay, that ship is flying a French flag, France just paid us a bunch of money, we'll let them go, right? Oh, there's an Italian ship, let's go get him, right? And so that's what they did. They were real big about enslaving Christians, or enslaving, mainly Christians that they came across. The Knights of St. John were there to kind of stop that. And that's kind of what they had evolved into at the time, since Jerusalem and all these other places have fallen completely to Muslim control. So they were kind of a thorn in the backside of the Ottoman Empire, right? That's kind of it. And so zoom back down on Malta. There we go. All right. By the way, the reason why they become the Knights of St. John is because it was it's Malta where John was left, right? And then where what's the island where he was? It's Malta. It was what? Patmos. Okay, scratch that. Never mind. I had that wrong. You're right. Okay, so Malta here. The Muslims put an army of like 60,000 on this little island to conquer it. And the defenders will hold out for over a month before finally the King of Spain will send a relief force and save them, okay? That siege, by the way, is known as one of the greatest defenses in modern history. The leader, the Grand Master, I think is what they call them. The Templars had a Grand Master, so do the Hospitallers. Their Grand Master had made it impossible for them to retreat. They're like, look, there's not going to be any retreat. There's not going to be any surrender. We're fighting to the death here, no matter what that looks like. I don't know if you can pull up a map of the fortresses on Malta, or pull up the fortress of Malta. I know there's one called St. Elmo that's like across the river from the main fortress. But anyways, they would hold out for a very long time, and the Spanish king would come and save them, right? It was a pretty neat moment in history there where they get saved. It's really, and there's lots of things that happen in that siege that modern historians just chalk up to like, well, this is just coincidence, right? That this happened. There you go. Is that what it looks like today? That's a big old castle. Yeah. What flag is that? It's got a French flag on it. It looks like a French flag. Okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter that much. Long story short, Knights of St. John the Hospitallers would actually continue on, right? They would be the one military order that would kind of survive throughout all of that. The Teutonic Knights, although most of them died at that battle in Gunberg, they would no longer exist as a military presence. And actually, this is kind of a neat thing. They would become kind of like Masons are now. But Hitler actually outlawed them in 1938 and banned them across Germany, right? So that was a thing. There you go. How would you like to be a guy on a boat with a sword and you got to go capture that? Does not look fun. But, is that, that's St. Elmo? Okay, yeah. So the main fortress that they would defend would actually be over here. They actually stationed a group of men here their orders were to fight and live as long as you can. And then maybe we'll try to get you out when the fortress finally falls. Like, we'll do our best, but your job is to fight and die in that position. That was their orders that were given. Those men fought there for 3 months before that fortress fell, right? So, anyways, as you can see across Europe with the whole talk of the Crusades and all this stuff, we always see it as like just purely a theological issue, and we really need to get away from that. The Crusades it's not a theological issue. The Catholics made it a theological issue, but really what I think it should be remembered as is a geopolitical issue. It's a way of dealing with the Muslim hordes that are constantly trying to conquer and take over more and more land. And everywhere they go, they're eradicating Christianity. And so it's really Christianity's defense it's their response of how to deal with the Muslim problem is the Crusades, right? Theologically, horrible things are happening theologically, right? The Pope is promising salvation to anyone who goes on crusade. They're promising penance and, we can get your dead relatives out of hell and all this other stuff, all these promises that they don't have any authority to make, but they were doing it anyway. I've become one of those skinny preachers that can't preach without water. Okay. Yeah. By the way, on YouTube, if you want to see like a full breakdown of this battle and like the way it takes place and everything, you can actually go on YouTube and find videos, and they actually lay out the battle plans of how these battles happen, both Malta and Constantinople. They do a pretty good job with it as far as like down to each attack what took place, right? And it turns out that the Muslims tried to do the same trick here that they tried to do at Constantinople, and that they tried, and you could see it back here actually. They actually came back here with their ships. They had a chain right here, the defenders did. They came back here with their ships and toted them over land so that they could do a seaborne assault at a place that they weren't expecting. However, this didn't work because the Christians saw the activity taking place. They're like, wait a minute. And so they went out there and put spikes and stuff like that under the water. And as the Muslim ships would try to come ashore, they all hit the spikes, and long story short, a bunch of them drowned, right? So, all right. The Ottomans, the Muslims at the time, their most famous soldiers that they would have, and you'll hear about these guys throughout history, were the Janissaries, right? Janissaries are, they are people, they're kids who were taken by the Muslims at a very young age and raised up in a military form of slavery, right? So they would go across the conquered lands, take the children of these people, take the strongest boys that they could find, and they would be trained for their entire life to be Janissaries, right? Those were the elite Ottoman troops. And you'll hear about those guys all throughout history as far as their fighting and how tough they were, all right? They played parts here at Malta and also at Constantinople as well. Okay. With the fall of Constantinople, that really marks the end of what we would come to call the medieval time period. And it marks the beginning. It's kind of the focal point of history for what would come to be known as the Renaissance. Okay? When Constantinople falls, what's left of anything to do with the Romans or Christians in the East, they abandon the area and they flee to Europe, right? It's a massive refugee crisis instead of it, and it's Christians, right? Trying to flee the Muslim hordes. That's what it is. So Renaissance, of course, would begin in Italy, right? Which is where many of the Byzantines went. All right, so the Renaissance, we'll pick up there starting next week and move into really what's going to become the Reformation, okay? By the way, that's another thing that kind of sealed the deal with the Teutonic Knights, is when they were trying to reform, their grandmaster converted to Lutheranism. Whoops. That kind of throws a kink in the plans, doesn't it? A military order that answers only to the Pope. Well, not so much. All right. Questions about any of this? All right, so we've wrapped up the end of the Crusades, that whole time period in history. All the things that are taking place by the time Luther shows up, which we'll talk about. We'll talk more about the theological issues that have developed inside the Catholic Church next week as we start to talk about the Reformation. Next week's going to be the forerunners of the Reformation, the guys you don't hear about much that are extremely important, right? Guys like John Huss and John Wycliffe, lots of Johns involved in the forerunning of the Reformation. But we'll talk about the theological issues. But at this time, the Catholic Church is more powerful than any kingdom in Europe. The Pope crowns every new king in Europe. Infant baptism is necessary for salvation. Last rites are necessary for salvation. It's become a purely works-based salvation. And that works-based salvation, those works can only be accomplished through the Catholic Church. Okay? It's no longer salvation by faith alone. Hasn't been for a long time at this point. Okay? Yeah. And let's see. Excommunication has become a big deal. That's how the Pope maintained control of the kings of Europe. He would excommunicate not people, but entire nations. And when the Pope excommunicated, say, France, then all of the Catholic churches and monasteries, all the places where they performed all of these miracles, or not, sorry, not micro, these means of salvations, what do they call them? Sacraments. There we go. Thank you. Where they performed all these sacraments, they would all close their doors. So if you're excommunicated, guess what? There's no more babies being baptized. There's no more last rites being performed. Therefore, everybody that dies in an excommunicated nation, according to Catholic doctrine, guess what? They're all going to purgatory or hell. And the people at the time, they didn't have the scripture. The Catholics at this point had kept it to themselves, and it was not, so they didn't know any better. That's literally what they believed. So if you got an entire population that's believing that everyone that's dying right now, all their loved ones that are dying, are going to hell or purgatory, what are you going to do? You're going to put pressure on your king to get this fixed. And so it would cause massive unrest in these kingdoms across medieval Europe if they got excommunicated. And so the Pope really is kind of playing arbiter, I guess you could say. He's the one that maintains control of this mess by, well, I don't like what you did, so you're excommunicated, right? So, yeah, that's kind of what it looks like at the time. All right? Yes? Yeah. When did that start? That's a good question. It would probably, let's Google that. It would have, yeah, it would have been there by the Renaissance. It may have even been there by the Crusades. What do they call those? Indulgences? Yeah. 1095. So the Crusades, they coincide with the Crusades. Began in the 11th century, specifically gaining prominence during the First Crusade, when Pope Urban II issued a papal bull concerning it. So there you go. Good question. So that, by the time Luther shows up, that had been going on for almost 400 years. Hey, give us some money, we'll pray for your dead relative and get him out of hell. Good thing we found a way to get this excommunication stuff profitable, huh? Yeah, now it's a double win for the Pope. Not only do I control the kings of Europe, but now we make a bunch of money on the back end because they all got to pay to get their relatives out of purgatory. How about that? Yikes. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, so you're going to make Brother Alonzo's head explode here in just a minute. Yes, but that's talking about the great winepress, right, where it's talking about waiting in blood. Now, the fall of Babylon that is described in the book of Revelation, amillennialists, in other words, people who view the millennium as kind of like already taking place or happening in front of us, will say that the fall of Baghdad is a significant historic event regarding to Revelation, right? We don't necessarily hold to that. I know this, though, that when it talks, where is it in the book of Revelation that the horsemen, not the four horsemen, there's these, what is it? There's horsemen there's a horseman with a bow that's given ability to wage war across the earth, right? And is it one of the horsemen? A bow without arrows, yeah. Yeah, and he kills how much of the earth? Yeah, 1/3 of the earth. I don't know, guys. It's sounding pretty familiar. So, but again, depending on which view you take of Revelation, you say, well, that's already happened or that hadn't happened yet. So, yeah. I'll say this, that if they're going to be riding with horses and bows today, it ain't going to do much, right? So, I do like the bees or the buzzing. That's what's that in Revelation? There's something that's released from the Euphrates that's buzzing, right? And we always thought, oh, those were helicopters or whatever, right? Yeah, scorpions with wings that sting people. Yeah, and they buzz. How about them drones? Yeah, coming out of Iran. How about that? Huh? Who knew? Yeah, the abyss. Yeah, Iran is definitely the abyss. I agree. All right. Any other questions regarding any of the stuff we talked about today? No? How many of you have heard of a Teutonic Knight before today? Raise your hand. The Teutonic Military Order. One? Good job. Ah. Okay, okay. Fair, fair, fair. Yeah. 2 weeks, yeah, the last history class, yeah. That's what, yeah. Remember, we didn't have it last week, so 2 weeks ago. Yeah. All right. What time is it? Y'all ready to go? No questions? Everybody's ready to go home? Prayer request. Yeah. That's right. I was going to talk to you about that. A good question. So, help me understand this. They're in such a vice right now because the oil from Venezuela has been cut off, right? Oh yeah, yeah. Sanction them. Either way, it's about to fall, huh? And you haven't been able to reach any of your family that's inside? So the cell phone towers and all that stuff or whatever, if they had them, are not working. Yeah. Well, a revolution of the people is only going to work if they can have guns. If they don't have guns, they can't. You can't do anything. Yeah. 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 Well, if there was ever a time for Cuba to no longer be under the thumb of Russia, it's now, because Russia can't afford to hold on to them. It still might be. It still might be. After what we did to Venezuela, you know, I highly doubt that the Cubans could stop something like that if we wanted to pull it off. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I bet the Coast Guard in Key West is really busy. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely need to pray for them. Yeah. We need to pray for all of our troops. We have several troops. I mean, yes, overall, but specifically, we have a lot of our own church members that are different parts of the world right now, either fighting or get ready to fight over there in Iran already. So we pray for them too. Yeah. I know Hannah's husband is, he's active duty right now. We have Jalen, of course, Miss Dorothy's son. He's still, as far as I know, he's still in Okinawa at the moment. Um, but yeah. Who? Oh yeah, Kyle. Yeah, Kyle. Kyle's, well, has he left yet? I'm I'm not sure if he's left yet. He probably already has, but he was supposed to go to Kuwait. So that was before this kicked off. He was supposed to go to Kuwait. So I would imagine he's definitely going to Kuwait now. So, all right. Let me check something real quick because there's I wanted to talk about that. Oh, we got to go. Ah. We can, yeah. We can certainly pray for him. I will say this: I have been enjoying, and I know Brother Lonzo is probably about ready to pull his hair out every time he sees an interview with this about Israel and everything, with all the Tucker Carlson and all these other people trying to figure out why evangelicals like Israel and all this other stuff. Look, the easiest reason to say why I like Israel more than the Muslim nations is because they're not Muslim. That pretty much solves it. Like, if they're killing the bad guys, we don't have to go kill the bad guys, but somebody's got to kill the bad guys. So it's either them or us, but you can't talk like that on television, apparently. You get in trouble. But I have really been enjoying watching them trying to find the reason that evangelicals have decided to be friendly towards Israel. And they always go back to Genesis. Nobody yet that I've seen in any of these interviews goes forward to Revelation, where it's like, look, to some extent, some sort of something Jewish, some Jewish something is there, right? So you could say, well, that Israel's not the Israel that we're talking about or whatever, but you don't know that. And so you better be safe than sorry, right? Revelation is pretty clear about the Battle of Armageddon, describing all the countries of the world coming to destroy Jerusalem, right? Coming to destroy we want to call it Israel, Jewish people, whatever, Christians. They will be Christians because they'll be converted. But they always go back to the verse in Genesis, right, where, what was the one that got Ted Cruz in trouble? That, if you bless Israel, I'll bless you. If you curse Israel, I'll curse you. Why do they go back? Go forward. Nobody wants to go forward, We could have a good time if we would just go forward and talk about Revelation. A lot of those guys' heads would start to explode, I think, when they start to realize, wait a minute, you mean the whole world's going to rally against this one little city in this one little place? What's happening? Exactly. Yeah. Who knew? This is actually playing out right in front of our eyes. So. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's got to be some PTSD inducing stuff. The missiles up top, yeah. That's kind of crazy. I thought about that too, thinking about the verse in Revelation. I know we always interpret it as angels, but talking about the stars falling from heaven and what that would look like. And if you were John trying to describe what you're seeing, how else would you do that? Yeah. Yeah, there it is, Genesis 12. Yeah, read it for us. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, so they always keep bringing up, they're always like, well, do you think this Israel is that Israel? And the answer is, everyone says yes, but my answer is, at best, you don't know if it is or not, right? You can't say for sure that it's not, even if I'm willing to for sure say that this is the Israel that's talking about. So, but Revelation is pretty clear that there will be some sort of Jewish remnant that will be left over in that area. So, whether that's now or 1,000 years from now, each day we'll find out. So, okay, I'll say a prayer for us. I'll pray for our military people. I'll pray for the people in Cuba as well. Let me ask you this: are Cubans, thinking about our missionary this morning, are Cubans primarily Catholic still, or are they? I know they've been under communists trying to force them into atheism and stuff, but are they becoming what was the word? irreligiosity or whatever? Yeah, mixed. Yeah. I remember that story you told me about the Castro thing as far as they tell you to pray for God and ask for candy when they were in school. And you open your eyes, there's no candy, and then they tell you to pray to Castro and ask for candy, and the soldiers put candy on your desk. Yeah. How about that? Indoctrination. That'll do it. Uh-huh. For sure. All right. Let me say a prayer for us. We'll let you go home. Well, God, we come to right now. We thank you for this time to come together here today and talk about just what has happened in the history of the world. And God, the role that Christianity has played in the development of the world as we know it today. And God, I also pray that you look after the people in Cuba right now, particularly Brother Alonzo's family that he's not able to reach. God, we just pray that you be with our president as he deals with the way to resolve this situation. God, we just pray that you put advisors around him and people around him that will give advice that is in accordance with your will. And God, we also just pray for all of our soldiers, all of our military personnel that are fighting all across the world right now, particularly those that are in harm's way. God, we just pray that you keep them, you bless them, and God, that if they don't know you, that they will know you. And so God, just look after them and just help us to understand the times in which we're living and help us to know that the time is now and the time is urgent to get out and to share your word. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Before you go, hold on. I got a call from Brother Buford, and I'm going to announce this. I want y'all to come talk to me about it personally, as opposed to us dealing with this in a very public setting.